But he comes to a lot of these.
Yeah.
There you are.
Good morning. I'm Dave Crouch. This is the Public Affairs Roundtable, presented each month by the Williamson County Chamber of Commerce, affectionately known and now as Williamson, Inc. And we appreciate you being with us this morning. We've got a great show lined up this morning with several officials from the city of Franklin, most notably the mayor, Ken Moore, here at my right. To his right, city administrator, Eric Stuckey. The police chief, our new police chief, Deb Faulkner, and our fire chief, Rocky Garzarek. And we looking forward to finding out a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes at our city. And we may spend a little bit of time at the end talking about the more top of the 30,000 foot issues that they deal with. First of all, I did a little digging on Chief Faulkner and tried to learn a little bit more about her. Understand, Chief Faulkner, that you're from Nashville, but that you've been a Franklin person now for 9 years. Is that right?
That's correct. I was a native Nashvilleian, lived there all my life and went to school there, and was committed to the Metro Nashville Police Department for many years. And as a part of that, you were required to live in Davidson County. Once I left the Metro Police Department and went to work for the state of Tennessee, I could live anywhere I wanted, so I came to Franklin. It's safer here.
Well, we're glad to have you here and look forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you.
Now, you were appointed interim chief for a while, and now police chief. What was the chronology of that? When were you? Eric may remember that better than you.
I came to work for the city of Franklin in June of last year, and Chief Rohinsky left to take another job. I can't imagine people moving north these days, but because it's so cold in Grand Rapids, but he did. And then I was interim chief. It'll be a year this weekend, 4th of July weekend.
Okay, great. And Chief Garzarek, you've been here a while, and you reminded me we got to know each other at the Williamson County Fair, which is dear to my heart. But we had a great presence out there of police, fire, and sheriff's department personnel. You're originally from Alabama, it looks like.
Yes, sir. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Worked 25 years with the Hoover Fire Department. And retired as the chief of training. Went to Texas for 3 years and was the deputy chief in Round Rock, Texas. And then matriculated up into the interim fire chief's position. And I was actually competing for the Franklin job as well as a finalist in Franklin and in Carrollton, Texas at the same time. So,
thank you, Newt.
but been fire chief in Franklin now since 2004, so almost 11 years.
That's great. Well, good to have you all with us. Mayor Moore, Mr. Stuckey, I didn't mean to skip over you, but I did, didn't I?
You know who we are.
I know who you are, but just in case somebody doesn't, Ken Moore, how long have you been mayor now?
I became mayor in January of 2011 when then Mayor Schroer resigned to become commissioner of TDOT, and then October of 2011 was elected to a 4-year term.
Right, okay. And up for election again this year. Is that?
Thanks for mentioning that. And I've got it right here on the screen, what you're supposed to say. Yes, our next election, city election, will be in October this year. We'll be electing 4 at-large aldermen and the mayor.
Okay. As of now, no opposition that has filed anyway?
Not against the mayor. We have one other candidate that's running against an incumbent.
Okay. And I think the incumbent is with us this morning, Ann Peterson. You want to wave to us? And I don't see any of the other aldermen with us this morning, but we appreciate your presence, and if you have anything to offer, please step forward. But Eric, you've been here how long now?
My first day on the job was January 1, 2009, so 6.5 years now.
Okay.
And lots happened, but it seems like a blink of an eye. It's been a great time to be in Franklin. A lot of great things have happened, and get to work with an excellent team like you see before you today.
Right. Now, not long after you came on board, and just a couple of 3-4 years after Rocky came on board, we had a flood, and I guess, Dr. Moore, you were not yet mayor at that time, were you?
No,
But,
Mayor Schroer was mayor then, and I was an alderman.
Okay.
Did have the opportunity to be out in the community the day after the flood, along with Alderman Peterson, surveying the damage, delivering food. It was a difficult time for our city, but our city responded in great fashion, as I would expect them to,
It was,
because of some of the staff that you see here.
and from personal experience, it was one of those wake-up calls that I guess you get in life occasionally, and getting a signal to make sure we're talking into the mics, guys. So but the good that came out of that, it was amazing. The people that came out to help and offer help and so forth in this town are amazing, and including the city officials, and we appreciate that. First of all, let's I want to get to know our police chief a little better, and what she's learned so far in her first year here with the city. We continue to have incidents that are, I guess, wake-up calls. The flood in 2010 was a wake-up call. We've had a disaster down at Goose Creek about a year ago. We've, I guess we learn more and more about what kind of team we've got here each time we have one of those incidents. Chief Faulkner, what have you learned since you've been here, and what's unique about the Franklin Police Department and the city of Franklin?
Well, some things I can tell you and some I can't.
We want to know the stuff
But
you can't tell us.
It's been interesting, as you would suspect. I have an amazing job, and I'm honored to be the police chief for the city of Franklin. I can't think of a better job. Yes, the tanker explosion that occurred earlier in the year was certainly a terrible tragedy, and lessons learned from that. I guess the big one, if people didn't already know it, is that we have an amazing cooperative effort, a team effort between emergency medical at the hospital and certainly the fire department and the police department. Everybody knew exactly what to do. The training kicked in, the planning, the practice, the discussions, the tabletop exercises that we do, all of that kicked in without a blink of the eye. And it was a tragic situation, terrible, but it was handled expertly, in my opinion. I do have an incredible team, and there's probably not a lot I can tell you about your police department that you don't already know. But certainly they are officers who go day to day answering calls, do an amazing job, particularly in this hot weather, bad weather, floods, tornadoes, whatever it is. But it's kind of my theory and my observation is that they protect the innocent by confronting and arresting aggressors. But they're also out there during bad weather. I heard it on the radio, on the police radio. Officers were out assisting citizens during the winter weather that we had back in February and March, where we had tremendous ice and snow. And I actually heard a car dispatched to go bring in the mail for an elderly couple who had not been able to get to their mailbox all week, and they wanted to see their mail. And so he said 10-4, and I thought in Nashville that would never happen. They just wouldn't have the time to do it and would not necessarily make the effort. Saw a picture on Facebook last week where one of our officers was power washing a citizen's driveway for him. And he came up and self-reported because he was afraid he'd be in trouble when he found out it was on Facebook. The gentleman was in a wheelchair. He'd been injured last year and was in a wheelchair and was trying to power wash his driveway, and the officer saw it and stopped and said, "I'll finish this for you." So that's the kind of men and women that we have. They're out there trying to work these crashes that we have. Traffic is an issue, as we all know, and yet they take the time to play football with kids when they see a game going and encourage them to watch the traffic when they're playing ball. So I'm inspired by that work. I think we certainly are very blessed in Franklin that officers have the opportunities to interact with the public that they serve because, I don't want to sound mushy, but it's true. Behind their badge is a heart. And they think as much with that as they do with their head, and they do incredible work every day. And I take my hat off to them. They're amazing, amazing group of men and women. We recently had 10 new officers that we graduated, and one of the Franklin officers who was attending the state academy to be post-certified, out of 90 police officers and deputies across the state of Tennessee, it was a Franklin police officer that was number 1 in the class, and all 10 of them were in the top percentile.
Awesome.
All 10 were in the top 10%?
All 10 were in the top percentile. So we had the best and the brightest. This is a desirable city to work. We're honored by that, and we want to keep it that way. So that's just a little bit about what I've learned that I didn't already know. But I've been, as you would say, up close and personal with it.
Right.
And I'm just, I keep saying it, but it's true. I'm honored to be their chief.
Right. What about Franklin being a suburban, fairly affluent community makes us different from a police chief's standpoint? How does that change what the police department does here, say, versus Metro or Columbia or some other town?
We have amazing support from the citizens. I found that this is a very patriotic, very God-fearing, supportive of law enforcement and peace officers in general and firefighters. That's a special place to be. Other cities aren't so fortunate. But we have to continue to deserve that and to earn that and to have that respect and trust. We're doing a lot of discussions and training and going back to our basics at looking at community policing and how we can better serve and continue to build trust. We have a very popular Citizens Police Academy. We're expanding that to twice a year. And we're starting a high school, a teenager Citizens Police Academy, which my desire is that it will cause more interaction between our young people and our police officers. They'll get to know us more as men and women, and that we're parents and we're part of the community as well. And they get kind of a backdoor entrance into what we do every day and why we do it, dispel some of the myths about why we do certain things. We'll do a little CSI event for them to do a crime scene investigation. We'll let them run radar so they can see how we clock people and when we have complaints in some of the neighborhoods about speeding traffic and so on. I think it'll be fun. We'll have as much fun with it as hopefully they will, but we'll make it time well spent for them.
Okay, we had some kids, I guess they were, that were stirring up activity at our schools last year by calling in threats and so forth. Mm-hmm. What should the kids learn from the response to that, and why? How do you deal with things like that?
Well, again, that's another team effort. We work very closely with the Sheriff's Department because all of the school resource officers are Williamson County Sheriff's deputies. Mm-hmm. And we work very closely with them, particularly the inner schools, the Franklin schools. So we handle the outside. We have the school crossing guards, and we try to work very closely with Dr. Looney and the principals and the staff. Right. I think a big lesson learned is that kids need to know that there are circumstances where they're going to get caught. Somebody's going to tell on them. They're going to show up on social media. We have ways of tracking these discussions that they're having. They put their picture out there on Facebook and talk about it, and there are repercussions for those actions, and they're very serious. Mm-hmm. So we continue to train with the Sheriff's Department, also with the Fire Department. My worst nightmare is an active shooter in a school. We don't have time to waste with these silly bomb scares that kids are calling in for whatever reason.
Right.
But we take every one of them serious. We don't let our guard down for a second. And because our children they're our gift. I mean, they are our treasure here in Williamson County, and we want to do everything we can to protect them.
Right. Personal experience, not with the police department, but some of my son's friends were doing some things that were concerning me, and so I took him out to visit with Sheriff Long one day just to have him have a one-on-one conversation with law enforcement. And the sheriff turned around and said, "See that monitor? That's Centennial High School's parking lot." Mm-hmm. And so I presume y'all have the technology that he's got, but that somebody's always watching. Is that right?
That's true. I mean, there's cameras everywhere, and they should never assume that anything they're doing, that it's not going to show up, either on a monitor, a school security camera, or even other kids with their phones.
Yeah.
So that's an asset for us.
Right. Looking back over the news headlines of the last several months, the ones related to law enforcement, of course, the school situation, quite a few burglaries here recently. Well, quite a few for Franklin. I mean, that's a relative thing, I guess. Some shoplifting, and then some drunk drivers. And the burglaries you seem to have addressed, that has that quieted down since the neighborhood patrols
it's amazing how when people think you're everywhere all the time, how that kind of dries up and you get that message out, and that was the goal.
Right.
In fact, it was interesting yesterday. I have some of my flex officers as well as detectives from criminal investigations and also patrol officers out there in the neighborhood. They're checking out. You'll see them out there. They sort of stand out a little bit. But yesterday, I know Chief Polycastro's in the back. He was telling me that we had a complaint about an officer, no, not an officer, a man in a SUV with a beard that was around a daycare center, and it was one of our flex officers. And so, we kind of got reported, but that's good because we also pushed it out for citizens to let us know if they see anything out of place, because you know your neighborhoods and your businesses and your customers better than we do. But we had also discussed the fact that it would be good to go by the daycares. I had horrible experiences in Nashville where people were forgetting to bring all of the children into a daycare. Right. And so with this 104-degree heat index, we're being very mindful that accidents happen, and so we're kind of checking the daycare areas just to be safe. Right. But yeah, so that's been helpful. On the burglaries, we're out there in force. It's just good community policing. But it's also good to keep people on the run. We don't want that here.
Right.
I think that's been helpful, and I hope so. I mean, we get a lot of feedback. Also, our BOLO program, where we have pushed out for citizens to let us know if they're going to be out of town, and sometimes it's pretty quick. Maybe you're attending a funeral out of town. If they'll call our non-emergency number, our front desk main number, right, we'll take that information down. We'll push it out to communications and to patrol, right, and to all this directed patrol that we're doing, and they'll keep a special eye on what's going on, make sure papers are not piling up and things like that.
Right. Mayor, what have you learned about this chief of ours that we would like to know that maybe she's too modest or...
I'm like the chief. There's certain things I can't tell you. I actually had the opportunity to meet Chief Faulkner when there was an empty alderman's seat. I had the opportunity to meet her at that time, but then we went through Leadership Middle Tennessee together, and I gained great respect for her and her work. Of course, we do have some interaction sometimes on certain issues, and Chief Faulkner is always more than professional, very well informed. Just so proud that she's our police chief.
Thank you, Mayor.
Real glad to have her with us this morning. Thank you for sharing what you have, and don't go away. We may circle back around. Rocky Garzarek. Am I pronouncing that last name correctly?
That's a great job.
Good. The What about Franklin attracted you here, and what's unique about our fire department?
Well, first of all, I think the historic downtown is one reason. The school system, I had kids at school age at the time. Great school systems here, as we all know. They had the commercial corridor, the Cool Springs Mall was very similar to the community I left in Birmingham, because we had a Galleria Mall of equivalent size. And the people, just walking up and down the street, getting to know the people, and it's unbelievable at the amount of people that I have met. And I'll be walking through, I'll go to lunch and have a uniform on, be walking down the street, and someone will stop me and say, "Where do I need to eat? We're from out of town." And then 3 months later, they contact me and go, "Chief, I'd like to take you to lunch because we moved here." And I'm like, "That's great." And so as serving as the fire chief, too, a little human interest story is there's 3 fire chiefs retired that's living in our community that all contacted me and said, "We're moving to Franklin, you know, which neighborhoods do we need to be looking at?" You know, and so the next thing I know, they're all 3 living here, and they're from like San Marcos, California, Stockton, California, Gardenia, California. Another fire chief just moved here from Everett, Massachusetts, who had lunch with me 2 weeks ago. He moved to Laverne, but now he's trying to move to Franklin. And so those networking contacts nationally, really, just by, you know, my presence in the job that I hold in this prestigious community, people from all over the nation are always contacting me about Franklin, Tennessee.
1 year ago, in August, you got a phone call, you said, at 3:45 in the morning. And you were in where?
I was in Dallas, Texas, and it was 3:45 a.m., and 2 of the deputy chiefs were with me at a conference. And
2 out of 3, right?
2 out of the 3. And we always leave one in town. But they said, "We've had a tragic incident. We've got on I-65, we've got a bridge abutment that's been compromised, the concrete on it, and, you know, part of your community is cut off from emergency services." And so I called the other deputy chiefs at their rooms. We met in the lobby and had a conference call with Todd Horton, who was the deputy chief that was left in town. And we put a contingency plan in place by 5 a.m. and had a fire station in service at the Ag Center, thanks to our partners with the county and our great relationship with them. And that station has been functioning ever since August 15th.
Wow. Now, how do you put out a fire like that, or do you just let it burn out?
Well, typically you just let it burn out, but you know, that was such a tragic incident. There was a person that lost their lives, and sometimes it's inevitable. You can't do anything about that, and you certainly can't jeopardize your crews when you know that person has perished. And you know, our hearts felt appreciation and went out to that family in sympathy. But there was really nothing we could do but to allow that tanker with, you know, 12,000 gallons of fuel on it to consume itself. But more importantly is the call to action. And I said a lot of times that almost every day on the job, it's like I'm going through an assessment center to see if I get the fire chief's position. Because it's just events like that you really have to be a quick thinker, quick on your feet. It's a real call to action on your part, and thank God that I have the dedicated men and women in the Franklin Fire Department that we can pull off things like that.
Now, our fire department also has the I guess you'd call it EMS responsibility for the city of Franklin for the ambulance service and that sort of thing. Is that correct, or how do y'all cooperate with the county on that?
Well, we cooperate great, but the county does the transport, but we are a full advanced life support provider out of all 7 of our fire stations currently, which means that we have paramedics on duty that respond and get on the scene and stabilize the patient usually in 3 to 4 minutes and start that definitive medical care on that patient. And you know, the county comes in with their ambulances and transports that patient to the appropriate medical facility, whether it's Williamson Medical Center or Vanderbilt.
Right. So I knew you had paramedics on, I guess, all the trucks now, and wondered how that interaction with the county goes. And we do have some county officials here I want to introduce later on, but and we appreciate their presence here. But just want to make sure I understand, or we understand, how the city and the county works together. We've got a great relationship there, and it seems to work fine. Looking back at the media over the last year or two, it appears that although there are some fires in town, there aren't that many as a general rule, and most of your activity appears to be fire prevention. Is that a fair statement?
It's a fair statement, but getting back to the emergency medical services, that's about 70% of our call volume now. So we make about 6,000 calls a year. So you do the math, so about 4,200 of those are some medical calls for us. But we have 3 divisions basically, and prevention is a major component of what we do, and the prevention of fires and code enforcement from a standpoint of the safety regulations in this community.
Well, again, with reference to the fair, I got to know the fire marshal pretty well through that experience. And he's pretty cool about how he works with you, even though he's pushing you to do better and better all the time. Andy King he's a good guy to work with, and again, from personal experience, enjoyed working with him, and that just reminded me of something I'm going to say on the air. But Clay Mackey, he's my hero, and he's one of your firemen. And when the 2010 floods came and our family got displaced to a rental house for 7 months, he said, "Just don't worry about the grass." He said, "I'll cut your grass." And he did for 7 months. Just showed up and cut the grass every week. And God, you just don't know how much that helped, because we had enough other things to worry about at that point that that was just a tremendous relief. And so give him a promotion, will you? He deserves it.
Give us his phone number.
Which station is he at, Rocky?
He works out of fire station number 2.
There. You got the number to that station, Mayor?
I do.
Clay does a great job.
Y'all are concerned about fireworks. Now, why? My boys kind of like fireworks. So.
Well, although they're patriotic, they are dangerous. And we do have an ordinance that in the city of Franklin, in our city limits, that bans the discharge, the storage, and the use of consumer fireworks. And in fact, in reality, we had a teenage boy last year that severely damaged his hands while discharging fireworks. So it is a reality that they're dangerous. They're a Class C explosive for a reason. And we just encourage the public to utilize the sanctioned events in the city that we do for 4th of July and that fireworks display, and do not allow your kids to use those dangerous items.
Okay, just wondered the background on that. I see a lot of and hear a lot from my friends in the development community about sprinklers. And of course, the developers don't want to pay for them, but it appears they've stopped a few fires here recently. And what's the cost benefit of sprinkling systems, and why are you so, I guess, pushing those as hard as you are?
Well, there's certain portions of our community that lacks the adequate water supply. And so, the builders will and developers will sprinkle those occupancies. It's one of the allowances that we give them. It's one of the trade-offs, basically. You could either spend a couple of $1 million upgrading the water distribution lines or sprinkle the houses. Now, from a personal standpoint, when I built my most recent house, I sprinkled it, and it cost me $1.07 a square foot. So the offset on that is, that anywhere I wanted to put a Christmas tree or a live Christmas tree or somewhere else in the house, it didn't worry me whatsoever. So the cost is minimum on a 3,000 square foot home. It cost me about $3,200 to sprinkle that. For the offset in my insurance premium, I got an offset of $150 to $175 a year, a reduction in what I would have paid in the insurance premium. So they would pay for themselves in time.
Right.
And, the lessons learned are that smoke alarms, we campaigned with the building industry back in the 80s to get smoke alarms in all the residents. Then in the 90s, we had to fight to get them hardwired to where you wouldn't have battery failures. But people still don't hear them when they go off. And, the one thing through the test that I've seen, and it's a little bit comical, but when you spray water in somebody's face, they will wake up compared to the smoke alarm going off.
Even my kids will wake up when you do that.
Get them off to school on time. But fire sprinklers we do encourage and promote those in our community. They're really an asset to the homeowner, and our builders and developers are seeing that more and more.
Right. Mr. Stuckey, what have you learned about this gentleman and how he runs a fire department, and what could you tell us about the behind the scenes that maybe he hadn't?
Well, Chief Garswick is a real leader in his profession. He has served recently as the president of the Southeastern Fire Chiefs Association, so that's representative of all the states in the southeastern region, and so that leadership is obvious. He's pushed our department to be more professional, to focus on a higher level of service, especially as it relates to emergency medical. He quickly did that analysis about what our service calls are and where that trend is going, and pushed us to have that advanced life support coming from every station every time so that we can meet the needs of our citizens. So that forward thinking, that leadership really matters. We have two real strong leaders here in our community and in their profession, and that's, I think, I'm biased, but from hearing them talk, I think that's obvious. And Chief Faulkner is very much the same way, extensive background in law enforcement at the state level, in Metro Nashville, now here in Franklin, a true leader, a trailblazer as a woman in law enforcement, quite frankly, and that just is her own leadership shines through in that role, but in everything she does too. So we are very fortunate to have this team here, and they do an excellent job.
Well, we're appreciative of the opportunity to get to know you a little better and find out a little bit more about how you think and how you run our fire department and police department, and appreciate your time. Let's move back to the city in general just for a few minutes. Mr. Mayor and Mr. City Administrator, you just approved a new budget, I think, this past week, and no tax increase, no property tax increase. Of course, I noticed that property tax is now only 8% of the city revenue. Is that according to the
I think
mayor's.
that's probably of all funds, that may be true, but it's our third highest revenue source in the general fund. But our primary driver in the general fund in particular continues to be sales tax, which is
Right.
about half of that revenue coming from sales tax.
Right. Thank goodness for Cool Springs.
Yes,
And,
that's right.
Now, what changed this year budget-wise? Now, obviously, you're funding the ongoing operations of all our departments,
Right.
but what were the priorities this year?
Well, we've got a general fund budget at $59 million and an all funds budget of $122 million. That $59 million level is actually the budget we had in 2008, 2009. So we dipped down with the recession and economic slowdown, and now here we are 6-7 years later where we now have gotten back up to that level. But the key elements in this budget reflect some key public safety components, some improvements in terms of our staffing in our parks area, driven by growth. We'll be bringing online our fire station number 8 at West Haven late this year. So we have the full operation and staffing of that included in the budget. We've established an interim fire station at Station 7 on the Ag Center property. What had been a temporary arrangement in the Ag Center and the green room there ultimately turned into a structure and temperature-controlled garage out there so that we permanently have a crew out there to meet the needs of that very much a growing segment of our community. So we provide for that. We are replacing breathing apparatus for our firefighters that have just aged out. That's a fairly expensive proposition, but obviously very important.
What is that?
The breathing apparatus that they have when they go in, self-contained breathing apparatus that
Okay.
firefighters use when fighting a fire to provide the oxygen they need if they're in a,
Okay.
in a very intense firefighting situation.
You used the term staged out. What does that mean? Is that what you said?
I don't know that I did, but
Okay.
that's okay.
Maybe I misheard something.
Yeah, so we are replacing most of those for our firefighters because they're just aging. Maybe I said aged out. Maybe that's right. You age those and look at the life cycle of those, and it's time to replace
I'm looking
those.
back at my newsletter from my mayor here this week, and Rocky, what's a bailout system?
Yeah.
Our firefighters need to have a personal bailout system in case they get trapped in a structure on certain levels. And so that personal bailout system, we provide them. And we've done that since 2005. And just to the shelf life and the usage of those bailout systems, it's time to replace them.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem. So we've provided for some additional staff in our parks to create some additional maintenance crews there, both for street trees within our neighborhoods and our parks facilities themselves. We do have funding in this budget to provide for body cameras for our police officers that are on patrol. That is something we're going to move through very carefully from a policy development, from an operational standpoint. There'll be some community dialogue around it because we know that that's where things are headed. We want to develop it in concert with the community, with the public, so that they understand how they're going to be used and how privacy is still honored and protected, but we also document our interactions. We have absolute trust in the chief and the team that we have, but feel that that's technology we need to take advantage of and have available so that we can document our interactions appropriately.
Just a curious question here, but when you start videoing how many guys you have on the street, or guys and ladies, 24 hours a day, that takes an enormous amount of storage space on a computer somewhere.
Yeah.
Where is that, and what's gonna?
Yeah, that's all part of what's in the plan in terms of managing that information. The policy will guide us in terms of what we maintain and how long we maintain it. Obviously, if it involves a direct case, you're going to need to maintain it as it works through the court system, et cetera. But that's all part of the development of it, is how you manage the information, how long you preserve it, and we actually will have a position that will will oversee that whole program and managing that content, cycling it out, and then how it is used. And it is not something we enter into lightly. Chief and her team have been working on it diligently in terms of looking at policies and procedures. And like I said, when we are ready to bring it forward, we'll have some additional public discussion so everyone understands how it's being deployed and how we use it appropriately for our staff and for our public.
Right. Mayor, I see an item in here, architectural services for City Hall building plan. Are we moving on that again?
Well, I think this is encouraging, and we're going to start looking at some of the architecture of a potential new city hall. We're in an old mall. We know that it's a giant sucking hole as far as money.
But it's so attractive.
It's a building that's outlived its usefulness. The upkeep on it is tremendous. To bring it up to standard is cost prohibitive. To renovate it, it would be cheaper to build a new city hall. So, unfortunately, we don't have the funding for it at this time, but this would highlight just the opportunity to continue to move forward and study this issue, and not only some space needs, but how we would fit a potential city hall on the square, which is tended to be what our community wants, is to relocate the city hall on the square. And I think from past experience, we have the feeling that that's more just as cost effective as going out to a green field.
Right. What about the Bicentennial Mall? I see it's there's some new funds in there to develop that. Bicentennial Park, I guess it's referred to. What are we going to do there?
Well, first of all, I think that the visibility of Bicentennial Park has become much more apparent to our community since we completed 3rd Avenue Extended. We've had some experience with one event, Eat the Streets, down in 3rd Avenue Extended, where we closed off that street and had all the food trucks in there. And so all of a sudden you see what the potential for that area is. So the money, we have some additional trails that are going to go in there. We have a Point Park that I think is part on the bidding process pretty soon. Then we're going to do some renovation to the old shelter that's there so it's usable.
Right. Good.
One thing I did want to mention before you go further is that the chief, fire chief mentioned smoke detectors, and many of us have aging parents or people that maybe from handicap or whatever can't get up there and change those smoke detectors out. And that is a service that the chief's department will offer, is to come out and do that. And one of the worst stories I ever heard was somebody that died in a fire, and they found their smoke detector over in a drawer. So that opportunity is there. They're eager to come out. So that was a great commercial for you, Rocky.
Now,
Thank you.
How often are those batteries supposed to be replaced, Chief?
Twice a year.
Twice a year.
Yep.
That's so
and-
that I don't wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with one of them beeping at me.
That chirping.
Yeah, but we highly encourage you to, after 10 years that they've been in a residence, that you replace them with a detector nowadays that has a 10-year lithium battery in it. So, but we do offer that service. Thank you, Mayor, for that public safety announcement. But we do offer that service, and every year we probably install about 200 smoke detectors in our community.
Right. Now, Mayor, the Master Parks Plan update, is there anything unusual expected to come out of that, or what are we trying to do there? What's the objective?
Well, I think some important information is going to come out of it. It's been a number of years since we reviewed the Parks Master Plan, and our community has changed a lot in those years. I think that I've always had the feeling we had plenty of parkland, and one thing that I recently learned is that a very high percentage of our parkland is historic park rather than active park, which many of our community wants. We're seeing where we need additional parks, such as in the southeast area of our community. We don't have any parks down in that, so we anticipate that the study is going to show us that we need a 100-acre park in that area. There's a lot of interest in neighborhood parks. There's lots of comments that we're going to see about the trail system. I think that when we look at our peer cities that we compare to, our trail system and greenways aren't near as developed as other communities that we like to compare ourselves to. So I think that's going to be something that percolates to the top too.
Right.
Connectivity.
I'm sure we'll be in conversation about that one of these days, but because the Harpeth is the natural place to have those trails running, and
well, Riverwalk is on that list also. There's lots of interest in our community for having a Riverwalk, and I think that's going to continue to move forward as a priority for many, not only the city in the future, but many of the groups in our community that work to make our community a better place to live.
Right. Now I understand that you're doing some cooking here sometime in the next little while. Tell us about that.
Well, I appreciate your asking about it. I'm actually going to be in a cook-off competition tomorrow morning at the farmers market out at the factory, and my competition is Mayor Napier, Corey Napier from down in Thompson Station. I kind of feel like it ought to be handicapped because he knows his way around a kitchen pretty good since his wife owns a restaurant. So I hope everybody will come out to the factory. I think it starts at 9:30. I'll be out there earlier, doing my prep work.
Good.
I'll also be prepared if Mayor Napier cuts his finger off or anything like that when he's trying to do the knife tricks. So there could be some other excitement, but it'll be fun. It's an opportunity to showcase the importance of locally grown food, being part of a sustainable community, highlighting the great farmers market that we're fortunate to have in our city, and also highlight Franklin tomorrow.
Great. Good deal. Again, like I mentioned earlier, we've got some public officials from the county here. I hope I'm not missing anybody, and I hope I'm going to get these names right. But, gentlemen, if you would step forward. Alan Lovett, I think, is the head of our county EMS program. And correct me when you get up here, but come up to the mic and introduce yourself, Alan. And then Bill Jorgensen, the head of our emergency services for the county, and I believe Mac Purdy. Did I get those names right? And if you would come up and just introduce yourselves and tell us how you interact with these gentlemen and ladies up here.
Bill first.
Thank you, Dave. I was sitting here, when you mentioned that I might be coming up here, I appreciate the heads up on that. But actually, daily, our staff, somewhere within emergency management, emergency communications, or Alan's area in EMS, interact with the city of Franklin on a daily basis. Probably one of the most important items that I think of when I think about these leaders sitting here is our partnerships and our relationships. There's nothing more important to that, and over the last few years that has grown tremendously.
Right.
And like today, I mean, we've got meeting after meeting today, this morning in this building, just dealing with public safety, and
Right.
and that's due to Eric's leadership and both chiefs here willing to sit down and talk about those tough public safety challenges that are in front of us all the time. So those relationships and partnerships are most important, and I appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Appreciate you coming up and letting us put a face with the name. I've heard of Bill Jorgensen for a long time, but I'd never met him. And I'd asked the other mayor, the county mayor, to bring him last month, but he wasn't in town. So introduce the two gentlemen behind you. Bill?
Well, Alan was up here first, so but Mac does directly report to me. So I'll start with Alan, though. Alan Lovett is the EMS director at Williamson Medical Center, and we've got a great partnership there also. So, Alan.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Unlike Bill, I didn't have a heads up, so I get to completely wing it. But that's as Chief Garza referred to earlier, that's kind of what we do. I was actually born in this building, so I'm born and raised native of Franklin, Tennessee. So this community is very near and dear to my heart. I still live in the county. I've had the privilege of working with all of the municipalities and the county government. Pretty much didn't fall far from the tree, if you would.
Right.
This apple's just continued to grow. We have a wonderful working relationship. You know, the very unfortunate bridge incident was part of what brought together and demonstrated how those things work together. And you've seen so much wonderful cooperation that has come between the city and the county on that. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank the city that when in the process of changing from an older building to a newer facility with emergency medical service, we had some issues with the property not being ready yet, and we needed a location to staff a 24-hour ambulance to continue serving the city. And through phone calls and interacting with Chief Garzrick and Eric and Mayor Moore, they were able to find a facility, and we've actually housed the apparatus and personnel that were at Noah Drive at Station 5 are the crew that are at the pole barn, as they refer to it, at the Ag Expo Center. And they said this is a perfect place. We can move you right in. And in just a few hours' time, working between the city, the county, and the medical center, we're able to be there. We also have interacted. I didn't work directly with Chief Faulkner, but Bill and I have both been committee members and chairpersons of the Homeland Security District 5, and we've had the privilege of working with Nashville for a number of years. I certainly served with them at that level as well. And it's great to be part of the community and great to see the increase in efforts, especially on communication systems between the governments.
Great. Appreciate
Thank you.
the opportunity to get to know you, Alan.
You as well, sir.
It's Mac, right?
That's correct, Mac Purdy, and I'm the Emergency Management Director here. Get to serve in that role here in my home community. Grew up here in Williamson County and the south end of the county, actually in Spring Hill, and kind of got started as a volunteer with the fire department and learned from many people that worked for the city fire department and trained me in that respect, and just was able to spend some time learning emergency management with the state and coming back here and live in Franklin now. And just, it's great to see the partnerships as we work to look at things like the May floods. I was living here but working for the state in May of 2010, and the ability to kind of focus life and around the community here at home and look at what we do day to day to prepare for that next disaster or big event is what I get the privilege to do with these great partners, and it's just a privilege to work and live here.
Now, as I understand, I'm guessing, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you're our eyes and ears watching those storms that are headed this direction to see if we've got issues that might be approaching that we need to get prepared for. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm not the only eyes and ears. There's a great system of partnership with all of our cities, especially Franklin and Brentwood, and all the men and women who are out serving, 24/7. And then our goal is to kind of focus that and paint that picture and keep that situational awareness so that we are aware and we're ready to respond to whatever that event is. So.
All right. Well, don't go to sleep. Just
Dave, while they're up here, I just want to say a word about the partnership work that's been going on. And we have also in the audience, Kirk Bednar's here from Brentwood. We meet regularly as a group to look at public safety issues. We're working collectively, and Alan referenced it, on establishing a true countywide public safety radio system. It will work off of the existing 800 megahertz system that Franklin has, but build towers and expand its reach so that we have and are operating off of the same system when we respond to emergencies, and also has the potential for us to tie into the Metro Nashville 800 megahertz system so that we have that coverage and that redundancy within us to serve the community well. So I just want to recognize the good work that we do together. We do joint emergency preparedness exercises about every quarter. We'll get together and do a tabletop together, city,
Right.
county, multiple cities, multiple other agencies, all working through those potential events and thinking through how we would respond. So all those add up, and you have a lot of folks who think and work together about how we serve the community.
Well, it's certainly nice to get to put faces with all these names and understand how you all work together. Behind the scenes, we never get to know you, and I just appreciate having a better appreciation for. That's a terrible grammar, but I just appreciate the opportunity to understand better how things go on behind the scenes and how y'all work for us. We got about 2 minutes left. If there's a question in the audience that anyone would have, Mindy, step forward and introduce yourself.
I'm so surprised.
Mindy Tate, Franklin tomorrow. I wanted to first to applaud the City of Franklin and the police and fire departments on their attempt to really build community. In doing so, I would like to bring up the topic of attainable housing and how is it important to you that your officers and your personnel are able to live in a city where they work? Would that improve and enhance their ability to interact with the public?
Which one of you all would like to address that first?
Yes. Well, I'll add from a global perspective, we have about 20 to 25% of our city employees live in Franklin. And we know many of them would like to if they could, and it just is harder to find those housing opportunities that fit that affordability level. So that is something we're looking at, not just for city employees, but also for teachers and others that serve our community that want to be part of living in the community they serve. And that is a value. And we want to provide those housing opportunities throughout the life cycle, from being right out of college to starting a family to being an empty nester to whatever, being a senior. We want to have a variety of options for folks to live here and be a part of Franklin. So.
Right.
And it does translate into our response in a certain way. I mean, our ability to have people available on site. If you're living here, you can get here quicker.
Right. Really enjoyed this. Our time is up. We appreciate the audience that we have with us this morning. You're great to get up and join us, and we appreciate your participation. The Lynn, the Vanderbilt Office of, help me out. Community, Neighborhood, and Government Relations. We appreciate your help in making this happen as well. And above all, Newt Danley and his crew at Channel 3 WCTV. It wouldn't happen without them. And if you see them in the community, thank them for the opportunity we have here. Thank you very much for being with us. Look forward to seeing you next month. Our guest will be Congressman Marsha Blackburn, and that will be the last Friday in July. So look forward to having you back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Mute all my.